The night sky above Arizona was clear and filled with stars. Greg Peters adjusted his telescope, sipping coffee to fight off the chill of the desert night. As an amateur astronomer, he spent most clear nights like this, watching the heavens and recording what he saw. Should be a good night for Mars, he mumbled to himself, checking his star chart. The red planet was particularly close this month. Greg pointed his telescope toward Mars and began to focus. Something caught his eye, a small, bright object that shouldn't be there. At first he thought it was a satellite, but its movement didn't match any normal orbit. He quickly took several photos through his telescope. At that same moment, 250 miles above Earth, NASA astronaut Heather Daniels floated toward the observation window of the International Space Station. Her scheduled Earth photography session was about to begin, but something on one of the monitoring screens caught her attention. "Houston, are you seeing these readings?" she asked, pushing herself toward the instrument panel. "What readings, ISS?" came the reply from Mission Control. "We're getting strange radiation spikes. They're coming from somewhere past lunar orbit." Mission Control went quiet for a moment. "Stand by, ISS." Heather looked out the window toward the, dark side of the moon. Nothing visible, but the instruments didn't lie. Something was out there. In Washington, D.C., Dr. Richard Coleman's phone rang at 3:14 a.m. He fumbled in the dark, knocking over a glass of water before finding it. "Coleman," he answered, his voice rough with sleep. "Richard, it's Bill from JPL. You need to see this data. Right now." 20 minutes later, Dr. Coleman sat in his home office staring at his computer screen, fully awake now. The radiation patterns were unlike anything he'd ever seen. They suggested multiple large objects entering the outer solar system, moving at speeds that defied conventional physics. "How many?" he asked. "At least 12 that we can detect," Bill replied. "And they're slowing down, that's the scary part. These aren't natural objects." Dr. Coleman took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I'll be at the observatory in 30 minutes. Don't share this with anyone else yet." By morning, the situation had escalated. The objects had been confirmed by 3 separate observatories. They were artificial and massive, each one larger than any spacecraft humans had ever built. Most troubling of all, they were spreading out through the solar system in what appeared to be a strategic formation. At the Pentagon, Admiral John Martinez of the United Nations Space Command walked into an emergency meeting. The room was filled with military officers and government officials all talking over each other. He set his coffee down and cleared his throat. The room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, as of 0600 this morning, Earth is under observation by an unknown extraterrestrial force," he said calmly. "These objects entered our solar system approximately 72 hours ago and have now positioned themselves throughout the outer planets. One has just entered the asteroid belt." A murmur ran through the room. "Are they hostile?" asked a general from the back. "Unknown," Martinez replied. "But they made no attempt to communicate before entering our territory, and they're moving with purpose." The door opened and a young lieutenant rushed in, handing the admiral a tablet. He read it quickly, his face darkening. "It appears our visitors have established observation posts near Jupiter and Saturn. They're actively scanning Earth's communications networks." The president's national security advisor stood up. "How long until this goes public?" As if in answer, everyone's phones began to buzz with news alerts. On the wall screen, a news broadcast showed an image, grainy but unmistakable, of an artificial object near Mars. The caption read, "Breaking. Amateur astronomer photographs alien spacecraft." "I guess that answers your question," Martinez said, grimly. Greg Peters had become an overnight sensation. His photos, taken from his backyard observatory, were now on every news channel worldwide. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since he'd posted them online. "I just pointed my telescope at Mars like I always do," he told the reporter outside his house. "And there it was. The shape is clearly artificial. No doubt about it." At the secret Pine Gap facility in Australia, Lieutenant Lisa Bennett studied the images captured by military satellites. Unlike the grainy public photos, these showed clear details of the alien vessels. They were massive, with strange angular projections and glowing energy signatures unlike anything in human engineering. Their propulsion system is beyond anything we've theorized, she said to the room of analysts. And look at these energy readings. Their power generation must be at least 1,000 times more efficient than our best nuclear reactors. One of the analysts looked up from his screen. Lieutenant, they're sending out smaller craft now. They appear to be survey vessels. Track them all, she ordered. I want to know every move they make. Dr. Samantha Patel worked furiously in her laboratory beneath a mountain in Colorado. Few people knew this facility existed, and even fewer knew what she had been developing here for the past 5 years. A theoretical defense system against potential extraterrestrial threats. Alan, are you seeing this? She called to her programmer colleague. Alan Murphy looked up from his computer. The scans? Yeah. Their communication signals are like nothing I've ever seen. No, not that. Look at the pattern. She pointed to a screen showing wavelength analyses. There's a vulnerability here. Their shields flicker when they transmit data. Alan's eyes widened. You're right. That could be something we can use. Across the globe, reactions to the alien presence varied wildly. In New York, people gathered in Times Square, some praying, some partying as if it were the end of the world. In Moscow, military vehicles moved through the streets. In Beijing, authorities urged calm while quietly moving defense systems into place. In the Oval Office, President Kevin Harlow prepared to address the nation. The speechwriters had been working all night, but he kept crossing out lines, rewriting them in his own words. The world is about to change forever, he said to his chief of staff. People deserve the truth, not political fluff. At that moment, on the edge of the asteroid belt, the largest of the alien vessels changed course. It moved deliberately toward Earth, followed by 2 smaller ships. Admiral Martinez received the alert while walking to the UN General Assembly. He paused in the hallway, reading the message twice. They're coming, he said to his aide. Tell the President the visitors are on the move. Estimated arrival at Earth orbit, 36 hours. Humanity had spent centuries wondering if we were alone in the universe. Now, in the silence of space, Earth prepared to receive its answer, and it was approaching. Fast. The world held its breath as the alien ships approached Earth. News channels ran nonstop coverage. Religious leaders called for prayer. Military forces around the globe moved to high alert. President Kevin Harlow stood before the United Nations General Assembly. Representatives from every nation sat in tense silence. We face this moment together, he said, his voice steady, not as separate countries but as one human family. Whatever happens next, we must stand united. As he spoke, screens throughout the chamber suddenly flickered. The president's image disappeared, replaced by something no human had ever seen before. The alien had dark purple skin and 6 yellow eyes arranged in a circle around its head. It wore ornate armor with symbols that seemed to glow from within. People of Earth, it spoke in perfect English, its voice deep and resonant. I am High Commander Zorthal of the Valkyrian Empire. Your world has been noticed. The room erupted, in chaos. The alien continued unperturbed. The location of your solar system is of strategic importance to our expansion. Your planet's resources and position make it valuable to us. Admiral Martinez watched from the back of the room, his face grim. This was exactly what he had feared. The Valkyrian Empire offers you 2 choices, the alien commander continued. Surrender willingly and become a protectorate under our rule, or resist and face immediate destruction. A cold silence fell over the assembly. You have 72 hours to deliver your answer. Choose wisely. The transmission ended abruptly. For several seconds, no one moved or spoke. Then pandemonium broke loose. In a secure bunker beneath the Pentagon, Lieutenant Lisa Bennett reviewed the transmission data with her team. They had captured extensive readings during the alien broadcast. Their ships are even more advanced than we thought, she said, pointing to energy readings on her screen. These weapons signatures suggest they could destroy our major cities in minutes. A young analyst looked up from his computer. But there's something strange here, Lieutenant. The transmission contained way more data than necessary for a simple message. They were scanning us, Lisa realized. While they were talking, they were mapping our defenses. She pulled out her phone and called Admiral Martinez. Miles away in her underground laboratory, Dr. Samantha Patel worked frantically. The alien transmission had given her team valuable data about Valkyrian technology. Her assistant, Alan Murphy, typed rapidly at a computer terminal. Their shields operate on a frequency we can actually interact with, Samantha said excitedly. The modulation pattern is complex but not incomprehensible. Alan nodded without looking up from his screen. I'm running simulations now. If we can create a counter frequency, we might be able to disrupt their shield harmonics. How long to build? A working prototype? She asked. Alan finally looked up, his face serious. With current materials, maybe 50 hours. Samantha's expression fell. That's too long. We only have 72 hours total, and we'd need time to deploy it. Then we need better materials, Alan said simply. At the United Nations, emergency sessions continued. Around the clock. Some nations advocated immediate surrender to save lives. Others insisted humanity should never kneel to invaders. President Harlow met with his Security Council. Admiral Martinez presented the latest intelligence. They have at least 20 major ships in our solar system now, he explained. Their weapons technology is far beyond ours. A direct military confrontation would be suicide. What about Dr. Patel's defense system? Asked the president. Martinez shook his head. It's promising, but not ready. We don't have enough time. The president looked around the table. Then we need a different approach, one that doesn't rely on matching their technology. Colonel Frank Wilson, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Sir, I may have an idea. It's unconventional, but given our situation, I'm listening, Colonel, the president said. 24 hours later, military bases around the world were buzzing with activity, not preparing for battle, but executing a different kind of plan. Captain Michelle Gray reviewed her mission one last time. As one of Earth's most skilled pilots, she had been chosen to deliver humanity's response to the Valkyrian fleet. The shuttle has been modified according to specifications, her flight engineer told her. We've installed the special communication array Dr. Patel designed. It should be able to penetrate their shields just long enough to deliver the message. Michelle nodded, studying the small craft she would pilot. It looked fragile compared to the massive alien vessels waiting in orbit. And the package? She asked. Secured in the cargo hold, exactly as Colonel Wilson specified. At the United Nations, Admiral Martinez briefed the Security Council on the plan. We can't match their firepower, he explained. But we can make the price of victory too high for them to pay. Back in her lab, Dr. Patel put the finishing touches on a small device. It wasn't the shield disruptor she had hoped to complete. There simply wasn't time. Instead, it was something simpler but potentially just as effective. This will let Captain Gray broadcast directly into their command ship, she explained to Alan. They won't be able to block it or trace it back to us. Will it work? He asked. It has to, she replied. At Cape Canaveral, Captain Michelle Gray climbed into her shuttle. The mission was classified at the highest level. Only a handful of people knew what she carried or what she planned to do. Control, this is Gray. I'm ready for launch, she said into her headset. Understood, Captain. You are go for launch. Godspeed. The shuttle's engines fired, pushing her back into her seat as the craft rose into the sky. Within minutes, she had left Earth's atmosphere and was heading toward the massive Valkyrian vessel hovering in orbit. Valkyrian command ship, this is Earth shuttle requesting permission to approach, she transmitted. I bring Earth's official response to High Commander Zorthal. There was a long pause before a reply came. Earth shuttle, you may approach docking. Bay 4. Any deviation from your course will result in immediate destruction. Understood, Michelle replied, her hands steady on the controls. As her shuttle approached the enormous alien vessel, she activated Dr. Patel's device. Then she opened a channel to deliver humanity's message. High Commander Zorthal, I bring Earth's answer to your ultimatum. On the bridge of his ship, Zorthal watched the tiny human shuttle approach. These primitives were either very brave or very foolish. He was curious to see which. "Transmit your response," he ordered. Instead of surrender documents, his screens filled with technical data. Maps of Earth appeared, with thousands of points marked in red. Zorthal recognized them immediately as nuclear weapons sites. Then came the message that would change everything. "The people of Earth will never surrender." Captain Gray's voice came through clearly. "If you attack, every nuclear weapon on our planet will detonate simultaneously. Our world will become a radioactive wasteland for centuries, and the electromagnetic pulse will severely damage any ships in orbit." Zorthal stared at the screen in disbelief as she continued. "You can have Earth, but not while we're alive to stop you, and if we die, you get nothing but radioactive ruins." High Commander Zorthal's 6 yellow eyes blinked in sequence as he processed the human's message. In his 300 years commanding the Valkyrian expansion fleet, he had never received such a response. Planets typically surrendered immediately, or mounted futile military resistance, but this was different. "Verify their capability," he ordered his science officer. "Can these humans actually do what they claim?" The science officer analyzed the data streaming across his console. "The nuclear weapons exist in the numbers they indicate. And yes, Commander, if detonated simultaneously, they would render the planet unusable for approximately 300 cycles. The electromagnetic pulse would indeed damage our vessels in low orbit." Zorthal stood silently, considering the implications. Then he turned to the communications officer. "Inform the human messenger that we have received their response. They will hear from us before the deadline." In Captain Michelle Gray's shuttle, tension hung in the air. She had delivered humanity's message, and now she waited. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was only minutes. Finally, her communication system activated. "Human vessel, your message is acknowledged. Return to your planet. The Valkyrian Empire will respond within the designated time frame." Michelle released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Understood," she replied simply, then turned her shuttle back toward Earth. As she flew away from the massive alien vessel, she activated her secure channel. "Eagle to nest. Message delivered. They're thinking it over." Admiral Martinez's voice came through. "Good work, Captain. Return to base immediately." Back on Earth, inside the war room beneath the White House, President Harlow and his advisors awaited news. "They didn't destroy her shuttle," Colonel Wilson noted when the report came in. "That's something, at least." The president nodded. "But we've just threatened to destroy our own planet. Will they believe we'd actually do it?" "They need to study our history," Admiral Martinez said grimly. "Then they'll know we're not bluffing." In another part of the complex, Dr. Samantha Patel and Alan Murphy continued working on their shield disruption technology. They had made progress, but time was running short. "If we can just isolate this frequency," Samantha muttered, adjusting settings on her equipment. "Their shields fluctuate in a predictable pattern when they communicate." Alan looked up from his workstation. "What if we don't need to bring down their entire shield? What if we just need to create a small window? Just enough to deliver a targeted strike?" Samantha's eyes widened. "That's it. We don't need to disable everything. Just create a momentary vulnerability at a specific point." She reached for her phone. "I need to talk to Admiral Martinez right away." Meanwhile, aboard the Valkyrian command ship, Intelligence Officer Krelvar had been assigned an unusual task: determine if humans were truly capable of such self-destructive resolve. Krelvar had spent hours studying intercepted human broadcasts, historical records, and literature. The more he learned, the more disturbed he became. "High Commander, I have completed my preliminary assessment of human psychology," he reported, entering Zorthal's private chamber. "And?" the commander asked. "These humans are unlike any species we have encountered," Krelvar began. "They have a concept they call freedom, which they value above their own survival. Throughout their history, there are countless examples of humans choosing death over subjugation." He displayed various historical images on the chamber's view screen: ancient warriors fighting to the death against overwhelming odds, resistance fighters from various wars, and famous last stands. They celebrate these defeats as victories of spirit, Krelvar explained. They teach their young that it is better to die free than live under control. Zorthal studied the images. Are you suggesting they would actually destroy their own world? I believe there is a high probability, Commander. Their threat should be taken seriously. The War Council of the Valkyrian Empire gathered on the flagship to discuss the human response. Unlike the unified front humanity was trying to present, the Valkyrians were divided. They are bluffing, Fleet Marshal Dex On insisted. No species would destroy their own world and everything they have built. We cannot afford to miscalculate, countered strategist Vormal. If they do what they threaten, we lose a valuable strategic position. High Commander Zorthal listened to the debate without comment. Finally, he raised a hand for silence. We'll test their resolve, he decided. Not with a full attack, but with a demonstration of our power. We will destroy one of their orbital satellites and observe their response. Back on Earth, Dr. Patel's team had finally achieved a breakthrough. In a hastily arranged test, they successfully created a small disruption in a simulated Valkyrian shield. It works, Alan exclaimed as the test readings came in. We can create a 2-meter opening for approximately 3.7 seconds. Not much time, Samantha said, but enough to deliver a payload. Lieutenant Lisa Bennett, who had been observing the test, immediately saw the military implications. We could deploy a tactical EMP device through that opening. Not enough to destroy their ships, but enough to disrupt their systems temporarily. I'll inform Admiral Martinez, Samantha said. We need to start production immediately. At the United Nations Space Command Center, Admiral Martinez was in the middle of a briefing when alarms suddenly blared throughout the complex. Sir, a technician called out. One of our military satellites just went dark. The European Defense Network is reporting direct energy weapon fire from the Valkyrian fleet. The room fell silent. This was the moment they had feared. Get me the President, Martinez ordered calmly, and prepare to implement Protocol Omega. Protocol Omega was the code name for Earth's nuclear response plan. Once initiated, it would begin the countdown to global detonation. In the Oval Office, President Harlow received the news with a grim expression. The Valkyrians had fired the first shot. Admiral, initiate Protocol Omega Stage 1, he ordered. Make sure they can detect our preparations. Stage 1 was deliberately designed to be observable from space. The movement of nuclear assets, the powering up of launch systems, all sending a clear message to the watching aliens. Yes, Mr. President. And what about Dr. Patel's new weapon? Fast track it. Get it deployed as soon as possible. Across the globe, military forces moved into position. Civilian populations were already in shelters, having been evacuated days earlier when the alien vessels first appeared. In a small reinforced bunker in Colorado, Colonel Frank Wilson addressed a team of elite pilots, including Captain Michelle Gray, who had recently returned from her mission to the Valkyrian ship. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been selected for what may be humanity's most important mission, he began. Thanks to Dr. Patel's breakthrough, we now have a way to strike back. He showed them schematics of small, maneuverable craft equipped with EMP devices and shield disruptors. Your job is to deliver these packages to specific points on the Valkyrian vessels. If we can disrupt their systems even temporarily, it might convince them our threat is real, and we have the means to hurt them. Captain Gray studied the schematics. These are essentially suicide missions, sir. Colonel Wilson didn't flinch. Yes, Captain, they are. That's why I'm only asking for volunteers. Without hesitation, every pilot in the room stepped forward. From his command ship, High Commander Zorthal observed the human response to his test attack. Their reaction was not panic, as he had expected, but a coordinated, deliberate preparation for global destruction. They're actually doing it, Krelvar said quietly. They're preparing to destroy their world rather than surrender. For the first time in his long career, Zorthal felt uncertainty. The Empire had never faced an enemy like this before. The sun rose over a changed Earth. Cities stood empty as people waited in underground shelters. Military bases hummed with activity as final preparations were made. The deadline set by the Valkyrian Empire would expire in just 12 hours. A hardened bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Captain Michelle Gray and her team of volunteer pilots prepared for their mission. Each of them understood they might not return. The shield disruptors have been installed on all 6 crafts, a technician reported. You'll have one shot at this. The disruptor creates a window in their shields for less than 4 seconds. Michelle nodded, studying the holographic display showing their targets. Key points on the main Valkyrian vessels where their sensors and weapon systems were concentrated. Remember, Colonel Wilson told the pilots, this isn't about destroying their ships. That's impossible with what we're carrying. This is about showing them we can hurt them. One of the younger pilots, Lieutenant Steve Rogers, looked nervous. Sir, what if this just makes them angry? They're already planning to take our planet, Michelle answered before the colonel could. We can't make the situation worse, but we might make them think twice. Aboard the Valkyrian command ship, High Commander Sorthal reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The humans had moved their nuclear weapons into launch position. Their military forces were dispersed in a way that suggested they were genuinely prepared to follow through on their threat. Their deadline response is due in 12 hours, his second-in-command reminded him. The War Council is divided on how to proceed. Sorthal stared at the view screen showing Earth, blue and vulnerable below them. What is your assessment, Krelvar? He asked the intelligence officer. Krelvar had barely slept in days, consumed by his study of human behavior. The more I learn about humans, the more convinced I am they will do exactly as they've threatened. They have a history of choosing death over defeat. No species we've encountered has ever been so irrational, said the second-in-command. Not irrational, Krelvar corrected. They simply value different things than we do. The Valkyrian Empire expands because we seek power and resources. Humans apparently value their autonomy more than life itself. High Commander Sorthal considered this. In Valkyrian culture, willingness to sacrifice everything for a principle was the highest virtue. A virtue they had not expected to find in these seemingly primitive beings. His thoughts were interrupted by an alarm. Commander, multiple small craft have launched from Earth's surface. At the United Nations Space Command, Admiral Martinez watched the mission unfold on large screens. President Harlow stood beside him, his face tense. Captain Gray's team has launched, Martinez reported. ETA to Valkyrian vessels is 7 minutes. And Dr. Patel's device? The president asked. Ready for deployment if this works. If we can disrupt their shields long enough, we can deliver the main EMP payload. He paused. Of course, that would be an act of war. President Harlow's expression was grim. They declared war when they threatened our planet, Admiral. We're just showing them we won't go quietly. Dr. Samantha Patel and Alan Murphy watched the mission from their laboratory, where they continued to refine their technology. The shield disruptors the pilots carried were just the beginning. If this works, Samantha said quietly, we might be able to develop something more powerful. Something that could actually disable their ships completely. Alan looked up from his computer. Let's hope we get the chance. In space, Captain Michelle Gray led her small squadron toward the massive Valkyrian vessels. The alien ships dwarfed their small craft, which had been hastily modified with Dr. Patel's technology. Remember your approach vectors, she told her team over the radio. Stay on course until the last possible moment. The disruptors need to be within 50 meters to work. The small Earth vessels accelerated toward their targets, looking tiny and fragile against the massive alien ships. They've spotted us, Lieutenant Rogers reported. Enemy weapons are powering up. Stay on course, Michelle ordered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. All that matters is getting close enough to deliver the payload. Aboard the Valkyrian command ship, weapons officers awaited orders to fire. Shall we destroy them, Commander? One asked. Sorthal studied the approaching human vessels with interest. No. Let us see what they're planning. Their craft are too small to pose any real threat. The human ships split up, each targeting a different Valkyrian vessel. They moved, with surprising speed and agility, making them difficult targets. Their pilots show skill, Krelvar observed. These must be their best. Captain Gray's ship approached the lead Valkyrian vessel, dodging energy pulses from defensive weapons. "30 seconds to target," she reported. "Disruptor charging." Aboard the Valkyrian ship, sensors suddenly detected an unusual energy signature from the human craft. "Commander, they're generating some kind of interference field." Zorthal stood up, suddenly alert. "Raise shields to maximum." But the warning came too late. Captain Gray's ship closed to optimal range, and she activated the disruptor. For 3.7 seconds, a small hole appeared in the Valkyrian shield. Through this opening, her ship fired its payload, a specially designed electromagnetic pulse device that attached to the hull of the alien vessel. Similar scenes played out at 5 other points around the Valkyrian fleet as the Earth pilots completed their mission. "Payloads delivered," Michelle reported. "All units returned to base." The small Earth vessels turned and accelerated away from the alien ships, but the Valkyrians were not about to let them escape so easily. Energy weapons fired, catching 2 of the Earth ships and vaporizing them instantly. Michelle watched in horror as her colleagues disappeared in flashes of light. "Evasive maneuvers," she ordered the remaining pilots. "Maximum speed." Inside the Valkyrian command ship, alarms blared as systems began to fail. The EMP devices activated, sending pulses of energy through the ship's hulls that disrupted communications, weapons systems, and internal controls. "What is happening?" Zorthal demanded, as the lights on his bridge flickered. "Some kind of electromagnetic attack," his science officer reported. "It's disrupting our systems, weapons offline, communications degraded, shield generators functioning at 60% capacity." The attack was far from crippling. The Valkyrian ships were too advanced to be disabled by such relatively primitive technology, but the message was clear. Humans had found a way to hurt them. Back on Earth, Admiral Martinez received reports of the mission's partial success. 4 pilots lost, but 2 returning safely, an officer reported. All 6 EMP devices successfully delivered and activated. "And the effect?" the president asked. "Moderate disruption to their systems, not enough to disable them, but enough to demonstrate our capabilities." President Harlow nodded slowly. "They now know 3 things. We're willing to destroy ourselves. Rather than surrender, we can penetrate their shields and we can hurt them." He turned to Admiral Martinez. "The question is, will it be enough to make them reconsider?" In orbit, Michelle Gray's damaged ship limped back toward Earth. Lieutenant Rogers flew beside her, his ship also showing battle damage. "Do you think it worked, Captain?" he asked over the radio. Michelle looked back at the Valkyrian fleet where lights flickered on some of the massive vessels. "I don't know. But we showed them we're not helpless." She paused. "And we showed them we're willing to die for our freedom." On the Valkyrian command ship, systems gradually returned to normal as their advanced technology compensated for the human attack. But the mood had changed. High Commander Zorthal called an emergency meeting of his war council. "These humans have surprised us twice now," he said. "First with their willingness to destroy their own planet, and now with technology that, while primitive, shows remarkable innovation." Krelvar nodded in agreement. "They adapted their weapons specifically to exploit a weakness in our shields that they detected only days ago. Their learning curve is steep. The deadline for Earth's final answer was approaching fast. The Valkyrian Empire had a decision to make, and it was no longer as simple as they had first thought." The final hours of the deadline ticked away. Around the world, people waited in shelters, not knowing if they would see another sunrise. Military forces stood ready to enact Protocol Omega if the order came. It was humanity's darkest hour, but also perhaps its most united. In the White House Situation Room, President Kevin Harlow and his advisors watched the clock. They had made their position clear. Now they waited for the Valkyrian response. 1 hour remaining, Admiral Martinez announced. Quietly, the president nodded. "Any movement from their fleet?" "None, sir. Their ships maintain position. No additional weapons have been activated since our strike." Dr. Samantha Patel entered the room, looking exhausted but determined. "Mr. President, we've continued improving our shield disruption technology. If we need to launch another strike, we can create larger openings in their defenses. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, the president replied. Aboard the Valkyrian command ship, High Commander Zorthal faced a decision unlike any in his career. The War Council remained divided. Some advocated for immediate attack, arguing that the humans could not possibly destroy their entire planet. Others urged caution, impressed by the humans' resolve and ingenuity. The humans have earned our respect, Krelvar argued. In 3,000 years of conquest, we have never encountered a species willing to die rather than submit. Fleet Marshal Dexon disagreed. Respect? They are primitives. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Yet they found a way to penetrate our shields, Zorthal pointed out. Imagine what they might achieve in 100 years. The commander paced the bridge, considering options. The Valkyrian Empire had not become the dominant force in the galaxy by being reckless. They conquered when victory was certain and avoided battles that might prove costly. There is another option, Zorthal said finally. One that honors both, their resolve and our interests. His officers looked at him with surprise. I will meet with their leaders, he announced. Face to face. The message from the Valkyrian fleet came with just 30 minutes remaining on the deadline. It was not what anyone expected. They want to meet? President Harlow asked in disbelief. Admiral Martinez nodded. High Commander Zorthal has requested a direct meeting with Earth's leadership at a neutral location of our choosing. It's a trap, Colonel Wilson said immediately. Perhaps, the Admiral replied, but they've offered to come with minimal security as a show of good faith. The President considered this development. If they wanted to destroy us, they could have done so already. Let's hear what they have to say. 24 hours later, in a heavily guarded facility in Geneva, preparations were complete. Security teams had swept the building multiple times. Snipers positioned on nearby rooftops. World leaders gathered in the main conference room, tense but hopeful. A small Valkyrian shuttle landed on the designated pad. True to his word, High Commander Zorthal emerged with only 2 officers, Krelvar and a security guard. President Harlow greeted the alien commander formally. Up close, the Valkyrian was even more imposing, nearly 7 feet tall with ornate armor that seemed to shift colors in the light. Commander Zorthal, welcome to Earth, the president said. President Harlow, the alien replied with a slight bow of his head. I appreciate your willingness to meet. They moved to the conference room where leaders from major nations waited. Captain Michelle Gray, still recovering from her mission, stood near the back of the room. She had been invited as a representative of those who had risked everything. High Commander Zorthal took his place at the table. His 6 yellow eyes scanned the assembled humans. In the Valkyrian Empire's 3,000-year history, he began, we have conquered hundreds of worlds. Some resisted with military force. Most surrendered when they saw our power. None has ever done what you did. The room was silent as he continued. Your warning, that you would destroy your own world rather than be conquered. We believed this to be a bluff at first. But we have studied your history. Your people have repeatedly chosen death over subjugation. He gestured to Krelvar. My intelligence officer has become quite an expert on human history. The ancient Spartans at Thermopylae, the defenders of the Alamo, the resistance fighters in your world wars. Time and again, humans have demonstrated the willingness to die for freedom. President Harlow nodded. Freedom is our highest value, Commander. We will fight for it to our last breath. This is not understood by all species, Zorthal replied, but it is understood by Valkyrians. In our culture, such resolve is considered the highest virtue. His next word surprised everyone. I am here to offer Earth not conquest, but alliance. Murmurs spread through the room. Alliance? Admiral Martinez asked skeptically. The Valkyrian Empire values strength and courage above all else, Zorthal explained. You have demonstrated both. Your position remains strategically valuable to us, but we now see greater value in having humans as allies rather than subjects. He stood and activated a holographic display showing a galactic map. Under our proposal, Earth would remain autonomous, In exchange for access to certain limited resources and strategic positioning rights, we would provide technological assistance. We would also invite human warriors to join our elite forces. President Harlow studied the alien carefully. You want our soldiers? Why? Sorthal's expression was difficult to read, but his voice carried something like admiration. Because your kind fights with a ferocity and determination we rarely see. There are conflicts in the galaxy where such qualities would be useful. Negotiations continued for days. Earth's leaders drove a hard bargain, ensuring their planet's independence while gaining access to interstellar technology. The final agreement granted humans the right to establish colonies on nearby uninhabited worlds and guaranteed Earth's sovereignty. 6 months later, astronaut Heather Daniels stood on the bridge of the Defiance, Earth's first interstellar vessel. Built with Valkyrian technology but crewed entirely by humans, it represented humanity's first step into the wider galaxy. Beside her stood a Valkyrian officer, one of several advisors helping the humans learn to operate their new ship. Your people adapt quickly, the Valkyrian noted as Heather expertly manipulated the ship's controls. Heather nodded. We've waited centuries to reach the stars. We're not going to waste the opportunity. The Valkyrian seemed hesitant, then asked a question that had been puzzling many in the Empire. There is something I do not understand. Why were your people so ready to destroy everything rather than submit? What makes freedom worth such a price? Heather paused, considering how to explain something so fundamental to human nature. Because we'd rather die on our feet than live on our knees, she said simply. That's what makes us human. The ship accelerated toward the edge of the solar system, carrying humanity's spirit out into the stars. Earth had faced its greatest threat and emerged not just surviving but with a new place in the galaxy. The Valkyrian Empire had set its sights on Earth and received one warning in return, a warning that had earned not their enmity, but their respect. And in the vastness of space that might make all the difference.